Hey babe, welcome to Baseball for Girls, where baseball meets soft girl energy. I'm Shaughnessy, and here we do baseball with heart, humanity, and a little humor. So, whether you're brand new to the game or deep in your baseball era, you're in the right place. So grab something cozy and settle in, and let's get into today's episode. Let's play ball. Hey babes, welcome back to another episode of Baseball for Girls. So I haven't been able to do a recap for these past couple of weeks. I do have one for y'all today. I was just traveling a lot over these past about 3 weeks. I first went to the SABR conference, so the Society for American Baseball Research, which was so much fun. I made an episode about that right before I got on my plane to go to my next destination. But when I was at SABR, I went to a Cleveland Guardians game, which was so much fun. I actually went twice. The first night I was able to sit in the press box just because, your girl is really friendly, and I made friends, and one of them happened to be the person that does the pitch count for the Cleveland Guardians. And he was like, "Oh, do you want to just come up to the press box?" And I was like, "Sure." So that's how I got up there. And it was so much fun. Well, it was kind of quiet up there. That people weren't really talking because everyone up there was like talking about the game, like the pitch clock guy, and then the balls and strikes person, and then the person that's like putting the numbers onto the board. So they were like kind of in a little bit of constant communication. So it wasn't really talkative, but I still had a really good time. I was able to like focus and score the game, which is always my favorite thing to do. So I had a really good time. And then the second night I went to the game as a lay person, and I just sat, in a regular seat. The Guardians ended up losing both of those games, unfortunately. But then on Sunday, they ended up winning. But I was in the air, I think, when they were playing. So I missed that game. But after that, I went to Kansas City to visit some friends. And so, of course, I had to force them to go to a Kansas City Royals game. So much fun. I loved it so much. When I went to the Guardians game, I got a jersey, and I also got one when I was at the Kansas City Royals game. I think that they lost, though, unfortunately, that night. We went on a Friday night, but it was still a whole lot of fun, especially just like catching up with my friends that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And after that, I did go to Sarasota, Florida to visit other friends, but unfortunately, while I was there, the Tampa Bay Rays were not in town, so I missed the opportunity to see the Rays, but I was able to see 2 different Major League Baseball games in person, go to 2 different stadiums, knock those ones off of my list, so I can't complain at all. Okay, so I'm back at home, and I can get back into doing recaps. So this week we will be doing a recap for the week of August 10th through the 16th. So for the weekly vibe, I think it'll be a little bit more interesting and more informative if I kind of shape it into a vocabulary kind of thing. So for the weekly vibe this week, there were a lot of shutouts. There were 16 shutouts this week. I guess there's probably usually a decent number of shutouts, but I definitely noticed when I was recording all the scores, like I always do, and I noticed that there were just a lot of shutouts. And so I thought it would be helpful to also define what a shutout is. So basically, it's when one team is able to score and then the other team doesn't score at all. So basically, if a team loses 4-0, so that team didn't get any points at all on the board, so they got shut out. It also means that the pitching for the winning team must have been really, really good. Otherwise, the other team would have been able to score at some point. It can also indicate that the offense, so the players that go up to the plate to try to hit the ball, so that's the offense. It means that the offense might be really struggling. They're not able to really see the ball well in order to hit it. So there could be a lot of different meanings for why a shutout happens. I didn't double check, but I don't think that any of the shutouts were like perfect games or anything like that. I do believe that these games still had hits, but they just never had a person score. So now to go into our sweeps for this past week. So for the weekday series, the San Diego Padres swept the Milwaukee Brewers. The Tampa Bay Rays swept the Sacramento Athletics. The LA Dodgers swept Kansas City Royals. And the Yankees swept the Mariners. So sad. I'm a Mariners fan. And then over the weekend, the Orioles swept the Tampa Bay Rays. So the Baltimore Orioles are also one of my favorite teams. So I was very happy to watch that. The New York Mets swept the Washington Nationals. The Chicago White Sox swept the Tigers. And the Philadelphia Phillies swept the Minnesota Twins. And for my sneaky team of the week, I'm actually going to go with the Colorado Rockies. So obviously the Rockies are not doing great. However, they won both of their past two series. So this past weekend, they played the Giants. They won 2 out of 3. And actually yesterday, so Sunday, they beat the Giants 13-7. And during this past week, the Rockies won their series versus the Arizona Diamondbacks, and we know the Diamondbacks are a pretty good team. I mean, they seem to be struggling a little bit, but you would still think that the Diamondbacks could take a series from the Rockies. But I will say that one of those games on Monday, when the Rockies were playing the Diamondbacks won 9-0, so that was a shutout game. But other than that, the Rockies have kind of been consistently winning or getting swept. It's either or. But I think that they're a sneaky team to watch just because we are approaching the critical part of the season where teams are really close to making it to the playoffs. And a lot of those teams are going to have to play the Rockies in September. And so baseball is 162 games. In the grand scheme of things, like every day, we're not really caring about a particular game. But once we get to September, every game starts to count. And you don't want to accidentally get swept by the Colorado Rockies. I think that they might be a team that kind of messes some teams up and forces them to not make it into the playoffs just because of a couple of games. And you'll kind of see how that's kind of playing out once I get into the temperature check and once I kind of explain how the wild card team placement kind of works. But the Rockies have won 50 games and lost 74 this season, so not great. They are definitely below 500, so when we say below 500, basically it's like a decimal point 500, so like 50%, like are they winning more or less than 50%? And the Rockies are at 403, so they're quite a bit under 500. They are currently 23.5 games behind the LA Dodgers, though. So, I mean, they're in a pretty tough division. And since they're with the Dodgers, we know that that is the National League West. Like I mentioned, they just won their series versus the Giants, and they won their series versus the Diamondbacks. So I know the Rockies are not going to be in the playoffs. They are 23 games behind. Okay, they're not making it to the playoffs. But I think they might be a little bit tricky once we get to September because the Rockies are not giving up, though. They are still playing pretty hard. They don't really care that they're 23 games behind. They still show up every day, and they're trying to play as best as they can. So for our temperature check, I have the teams that are heating up and the teams that are cooling down. And this week, we're going to start with the teams that are heating up. So I chose the Toronto Blue Jays. They've actually been doing a lot better as of late. Currently, they've won 61 games and they've lost 65 games this season. So that means they've won less than 50% of their games. So they are below 500 at 484. They are actually 14 and a half games behind the Tampa Bay Rays, who lead that division. So that division is the American League East. But the Blue Jays have won 7 and lost 3 of their past 10 games. So they have been doing better in this past 10. They won their series versus the Yankees this past weekend. And during their weekday series, they swept the Boston Red Sox. So before their loss yesterday versus the Yankees, they were on a 5-game winning streak. Also, fun fact, Dylan Cease, which is one of the ace starting pitchers for the Toronto Blue Jays, recently got to 201 strikeouts, which is his personal record for the season. So we are happy for him. The next team that I think is heating up are the San Diego Padres. So the Padres have won 67 games and lost 58 games this season. So they're above 500 at 536. They are 7 games behind the Dodgers. So again, when we think of being games behind, since the Padres are 7 games behind the Dodgers, that means that they would have to win 7 games, but the Dodgers would also have to lose 7 games in order for the Padres to get to the spot that the Dodgers are at, which isn't really that many games, especially compared to 14 and a half, which is what the Blue Jays have to cover, or 23, which is what the Rockies have to do. So it is still within reach for them to somehow get to the top of the division, but they are likely to be one of the wild cards for the National League. Also, the Padres have won 8 and lost 2 of their past 10 games. So they swept the Brewers during their weekday series, and they won their series versus the Guardians this past weekend. They did win yesterday, so they won on Sunday. They actually were one of the teams that shut out another team, so the Padres won 5-0 yesterday. So the Padres are really starting to heat up at this point of the season. And finally, I think that the Orioles are starting to heat up. They've won 61 games and they've lost 63 this season, so they're just below 500 at 492. They are 13 and a half games behind the Tampa Bay Rays. They're currently on a 3-game winning streak. They've won 5 and lost 5 of their past 10. But this weekend, like I mentioned, they swept the Tampa Bay Rays. Even though the Rays are at the top of the division, the Orioles were still able to sweep them this past weekend. So we love that for them. However, during their weekday series, they did lose to the Minnesota Twins. And for the teams that are cooling down, I chose the Texas Rangers. So the Rangers have won 61 games and lost 64 games. So they're below 500 at 488. They're only 2 games behind the Astros, and that is due to their series loss versus the Athletics this past weekend and their series loss versus the Angels during the weekday series. So they've only won 4 and lost 6 of their past 10 games. So like I mentioned, they're 2 games behind the Astros, so that means that they're in the American League West. And it really does seem that this division is going to really come down to the wire. The Rangers were at the top at one point. Now the the Mariners were at the top at one point. So these 2 games, even the 7 games, but 2 games behind the Astros, that's a very easy ground to cover. So they could easily end up being the top of the division, but right now they're definitely in a wild card position. But they did lose their spot at the top of this division. And then the Cleveland Guardians, I think, are also starting to cool down. Currently, they've won 60 games and lost 65 games this season, so they're below 500 at 480. They're 6 games behind the Chicago White Sox, so they are in the American League Central. They've won 3 games and lost 7 in their past 10, so they haven't really been winning very much lately. They lost their series versus the Padres. Like I mentioned, the Padres shut them out yesterday, so on Sunday, 5-0. But the Guardians did win on Saturday, and that was actually their 10,000th win as a franchise. So in their record of being a team, that was their 10,000th win. So I think that's pretty incredible. But honestly, the Guardians are a story of how the mighty have fallen, okay? Because the Guardians were indisputably at the top of this division for quite some time. They were kind of going back and forth with the White Sox, and now they're 6 games behind. The Tigers and the Twins have now surpassed the Guardians, which is kind of unprecedented. It's a little weird to see the Guardians so far behind the rest of their division, especially because they typically dominate that division. So they seem to be cooling down for now, but we definitely have our fingers crossed for a bounce back. We love the Guardians. Jose Ramirez, come on. Also, a fun fact that I really liked from this week. So Robert Acuña Jr., he is the right fielder / I think sometimes he plays center field. He's an outfielder for the Braves, so the Atlanta Braves. But this weekend, he hit his 39th leadoff home run. So Robert Acuña Jr. is notably the first person in the lineup for the Braves pretty consistently, unless he's injured. And 39 times he has, as soon as he goes up to the plate, he hits a home run. I believe that the count was 1-0. So it was 1 ball, no strikes. Boom, he hits a home run. Are we that surprised? Not really, but that's just so incredible to me. And then overall, he's hit 44 home runs in just like the first inning of a game. So Robert Acuña Jr. is still doing big things. I remember when he came back from an injury, I believe it had to be last year, maybe the year before, but he had just came back from his injury. Literally his first game back, he is the first one in the lineup. The very first pitch that is thrown, he hits a home run. And he basically wins the whole game because the Braves won that game 1-0. I don't even know who they were playing, but Robert Acuña Jr., I don't know. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. So now for the home run leaders. So I decided to list the top 5 home run leaders. So we have Kyle Schwarber. So we know he is the designated hitter for the Philadelphia Phillies. He is still at the top with 37 home runs. Then we have Yordan Alvarez, who is also a designated hitter, but for the Houston Astros. He now has 36 home runs. And a fun fact about Yordan Alvarez, he is in the running for getting a triple crown for the American League, which hasn't been done since 2012. So a triple crown is basically when a player is leading in batting average, leading in home runs, and leading in RBIs, so runs batted in. And we know that runs batted in is basically how many runs that player is able to allow to score. So if Yordan Alvarez is at the plate and he's trying to hit the ball and there's a runner, so there's already a player that's on second base, he is most likely to hit the ball and allow for that runner on second base to make it all the way home. So when you hear RBIs or runs batted in, that is what it's referring to. It really is just how many times a run has came in because of that player. So right now, Yordan Alvarez is leading the American League in batting average, home runs, and RBIs. So remember that Kyle Schwarber is on the Phillies, and the Phillies are in the National League, while the Astros are in the American League. So Alvarez right now is leading home runs in the American League, while Kyle is leading overall. Next, we have Junior Caminero, who is the third baseman for the Tampa Bay Rays, and Matt Olson, who is the first baseman for the Atlanta Braves. They both have 35 home runs. And then we have Hunter Goodman. So he is the catcher for the Colorado Rockies, and he has 34 home runs. So, to talk a little bit about the wild card standings, basically the wild cards are the teams that are competing for a playoff spot without actually winning their division. So, each league, so the American League and the National League, are going to be able to send 3 wild card teams to the playoffs, and they send 3 division winner teams, so like the American League East, Central, West, so that's 3 division winners, and then the same thing for the National League. So then overall, each league is going to be sending 6 teams overall to the playoffs. So the teams that are holding a wild card spot are in the playoffs, and the teams below them are trying to chase for a wild card spot. So that's what I'm kind of talking about when I'm referring to games behind at this point of the season, where the division leaders for most of the divisions at this point are pretty set in stone. There are a lot of teams that are too far behind to overtake the division leaders in some of these divisions, but some of these divisions are still up for grabs, and you just never know. So it kind of benefits for a team like the Guardians, who were at the top of the division for the majority of the season, but they go through a bit of a slump, but then they're able to still hopefully make it into a wild card spot, even though they didn't necessarily win the division. So that is really the benefit of the wild cards. But I will make another episode that's a lot more in depth, going through how the playoffs are going to look a lot closer to playoff season, just because we'll have a better picture of who's going to be going and who's definitely not. Right now, teams are kind of scrambling right after the trade deadline to really find their place within the standings. So we'll still have to wait and see how the season is going to all play out. But that is just kind of a quick and dirty understanding of the wild card standings. So basically each league sends 3 wild card teams and 3 division winner teams. And then the wild cards kind of play it out on each side. And it just gets way more complicated after that. But it kind of turns into a bracket style situation. So I'm not a basketball girly, but I'm sure we all know what March Madness is. I mean, I don't actually know what March Madness is, but I've definitely done the little brackets before and like chose the teams because they're like the colors or like the names of the teams or like the mascots. I've definitely done that. So it's kind of like a bracket style, but there's definitely not as many teams, I feel like. Honestly, I can't really compare and contrast because I don't really remember how the basketball one works, but it's kind of the same idea of like a bracket style and like knocking teams out and like that kind of thing. So now for the games that I'm looking forward to for this upcoming week. So the Chicago White Sox are going to be playing the Chicago Cubs. So that series is called the Crosstown series or Crosstown Classic. I had to look that up. I've never actually heard anyone call it that before, but some of these series have cute little names. This one is not one of them. But this season, they have only played 3 games, and the White Sox hold the lead against the Cubs. So they won 2, and the Chicago Cubs have won once. So this will be their first 3-game series since May 15th through the 17th. And the White Sox and the Cubs are not in the same league, so this is an interleague game. There are not a lot of games between leagues. Most of the time, you're going to see a lot of games played interdivisionally, so teams that are in the same division. Not so much teams that are not even in the same league. But obviously for the people of Chicago, this is a very fun series because I'm sure that there's a lot of rivalry there. I mean, I don't know, but I would assume that there's a lot of rivalry there. So I'm sure it's like a really fun series to go to if you are a native Chicagoan. But the Cubs are doing pretty well. They are in the National League Central. If you remember, the National League Central was dominating all of baseball for like the first 3 months of the season. Now it's definitely evened out a bit, with the Pirates and the Reds falling below 500. There was talk at one point of the NL Central being the only division, like basically ever, to like end the season with every single team above 500. That dream is dead. I mean, I guess it could happen. It's nothing is impossible in baseball, but the Reds, they are 17 and a half games behind. I'll say that. But the Cubs have won 72 games and lost 53 games this season, so they're above 500 at 576. They're only 5 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers, so there's still a pretty good chance that they could overtake the Brewers. It's definitely going to be neck and neck till the end. The Cubs did lose their series this past weekend versus St. Louis, so the St. Louis Cardinals, but they won their series versus the Nationals in the weekday series. But the Nationals won, obviously they won one of those games, but they won 7-0. So the Cubs were actually one of the teams that got shut out this week. And then for the White Sox, they are leading the American League Central as of today. They've won 65 games and lost 58 games, so they're above 500 at 528. They've won 6 and lost 4 of their past 10 games, so they've been doing pretty well, and they're on a 3-game winning streak right now. So we're going to see if they continue with this winning streak or if it will be broken today. The White Sox did sweep the Tigers this past weekend, but surprisingly, they lost their series versus the Reds during the week. So this will be a really fun series to watch. And then for this weekend, the American League East is going at it, honey, because the Tampa Bay Rays are coming to Camden Yards. They're coming to the Baltimore Orioles, and they want a rematch. So we're going to see how this series goes at home for the Orioles. So like I mentioned, the Orioles just swept the Tampa Bay Rays this past weekend. I just realized in the process of recording this episode that the Orioles and the Rays are actually playing a game literally right now. So they actually had a 4-game series. So I don't know actually if the Orioles are going to completely sweep the Rays, but as of right now, they've won 3 out of 4 games. So we'll see what happens this weekend. And then the Blue Jays are playing the Yankees. And they also just played the Yankees, where the Blue Jays won that series, taking 2 out of 3. I just double checked. They are not playing right now like the Orioles are, but they will be playing starting this Friday for another 3-game set, this time at Yankee Stadium. So this past weekend it was at the Blue Jays Stadium. So let's see if that home team advantage is advantaging for the Yankees like it did for the Blue Jays and for the Orioles. And finally, for the soft take for this week, I did want to talk about the Field of Dreams. So the Field of Dreams game happened last Thursday, August 13th. It was the Phillies versus the Twins, and the Phillies won that game. The Phillies actually ended up sweeping the Twins for the whole series, but the Field of Dreams game was only on Thursday, and it was only played in Iowa on Thursday. So the Field of Dreams is held in Iowa in a cornfield. So basically, the Field of Dreams is based on an old baseball movie that was about Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was a player that was banned from MLB because he was gambling. But the story kind of is a little bit of a redemption arc because obviously he still wanted to play baseball. So in the movie, he ends up making his own baseball field in a cornfield in Iowa, and I won't spoil it, but it gets like pretty emotional, and so that's why a lot of baseball fans really connect to it, because there's just like a lot of emotions that get tied up into this movie. And since they literally did knock down cornfields in order to do the movie. Fans would go to Iowa just to tour the Field of Dreams baseball field, to the point where MLB decided to make a annual Field of Dreams game starting in 2021, and it is held in Iowa in a cornfield, but not the same cornfield from the movie. It's in like a MLB regulated dimensions of a baseball field, even though we all know that there is not really any true regulations for baseball fields. But that's what Google said, that it's an MLB regulated sized field. And it really is just to honor the memories that you make when you're playing or watching baseball. Because honestly, it's not really the place, like the physical place, that matters. It really is the things that happen there and everything, all the memories that you have. And that's really why baseball is so obsessed with history, because the past never really leaves the game. It really stays with each fan and each person. And that's where the love for the game comes from. Okay, so that was a little bit of a longer episode, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And I'm back in town for right now, so I'll be doing more recaps. I will be out of town for Labor Day, but I'll plan something ahead of time for that. So make sure you're tuning in. I hope that you have a good rest of your week, and thank you for joining me in the softest corner of sports media. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Oh my gosh, wait. Hey babes, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Baseball for Girls. I probably forgot to plug the things that I'm doing, including my Instagram, so I just wanted to come back here and plug all my little things really quick. So my Instagram is baseball4girls_, and I just kind of post on there whenever I upload a new episode. I also have a baseball score tracker. It has about 40 weeks in it, and it has like some notes sections so that you can also keep track of games throughout the week. I use it for Major League Baseball games, but you can also use it for minor league games, your kids' games, your friends that are playing baseball, whatever. It's really just a nice way to keep track of all the games and the scores from each game, especially since baseball is typically played in series. So you should check that out. It's just called Baseball Score Log, and it can be found on Amazon, and it's only $9.99. I also include how I personally keep track of games as a little bit of an instruction guide on the first couple of pages, so you can keep score like the same way that I do. Also, I am in the process of writing a ebook, so it'll be a Baseball for Beginners ebook that I have been working on for the past couple of weeks. It'll just kind of walk through the rules of the game, how to watch it for the first time, and just give you a general idea for how to understand baseball from a very, very basic perspective. So I'll definitely let y'all know whenever that is available. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye.